Safe architecture isn't about locking everything down with very rigid top-down designs, enabling the continuous flow of value through the agile daily streams.
There are multiple architect roles that have been defined.
It has architecture that moves with the train, not way ahead of them or not above them. The architects would act as gatekeepers. That's what we call just-in-time architecture.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of NuePulse brought to you by Nuearcus. I am Neeraj Bachani, SPCT, and the host for today. And today we are going to discuss and explore about safe architecture, which is the invisible backbone of enterprise agility. Joining us today is Satyajit Nath, a seasoned safe architect, a transformation leader, an SPCT candidate who has helped multiple enterprises evolve from control heavy governance to flow focused, value centric agility. Let's jump in and welcome Satya.
Thank you, Neeraj. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Satya. So, first question first, what is safe architecture and how does it differ from the traditional enterprise architecture?
That's a great question. Safe architecture isn't about locking everything down with very rigid top-down designs. Instead, it's about enabling the continuous flow of value through the agile daily streams. Think of it as architecture that moves with the train, not way ahead of them or not above them. If you look at any traditional architecture, the architects would act as gatekeepers. They would review, approve, and sometimes slow things down. But in SAFE, architects are more like collaborators. They work side by side with the teams and the leaders, guide them on the decisions in real time. That's what we call just-in-time architecture, meaning we design the system just enough, just in time to support the next program increment or maybe two. Let me give you a real-world example. At a financial services client, we moved away from the centralized architecture review board. Instead, we embedded architects directly into each art. What was the result? The design review cycles dropped by about 40%. And the cross-domain alignment improved very significantly. Of course, it was not all smooth sailing. With each art making its own design decisions, integration became messy. So we had to introduce regular cadence like architecture syncs to make sure that everybody was aligned and not going back to those old school bottlenecks. So the bottom line, safe architecture is a mindset shift. It's about moving from control to collaboration, from upfront design to adaptive guidance, and that requires rethinking of how we have been doing things for all these years.
That's great definition, Satya, to begin with and to set the tone. There are multiple architect roles that have been defined. Can you please help us break them down to understand it better?
Oh, absolutely. SAFE defines three key architecture roles, and each of them play a very unique part in the big picture. The first one is a system architect. Think of this role as the hands-on guide within the art. They help the team make decisions around designs, the patterns, and the non-functional requirements like performance or scalability. For example, if a team is building a new customer onboarding feature, the system architect ensures that it fits well within the existing systems and meets the performance expectations. The next one is a solution architect. These are the folks that operate across multiple agile release trains, especially when we are working on large complex systems. Their job is to make sure that all the moving parts across the teams and across the trains come together smoothly. Imagine you're launching a new digital banking platform. The solution architect is the person who ensures that the mobile app, the backend services, the analytics pipeline, they're all integrated seamlessly. Last but not the least, we have the enterprise architect. This is the strategic layer. The enterprise architect is the one who is connecting the dots between business goals and the technical direction. They ensure that we are building the system today and that aligns with how the organization wants to do tomorrow. For instance, if the company is shifting to a cloud-first strategy, the enterprise architect ensures that all the teams are aligned on that vision. Now, too much technical. Let's try and make it a little simple for our listeners. Think of the system architect as a site engineer. So let's say you are building a city. This is the person who is focused on building the building or whatever you are trying to build as part of your own home. The solution architect is the city planner who is coordinating the neighborhoods, making sure we are building the station, we are building the city center, and all those infrastructure. The enterprise architect is the urban strategist who is setting up the long term vision, how the city will grow, what is the future expansion, and all those things. Now, each role is essential, and all of them must work in sync for the city to come true. Agility and innovation.
That's a great breakdown and explanation, Satya. I hope the audiences will be able to understand it better. Well, to your own experience working as an architect, what do you think has been the biggest misconception about architecture in SAFE?
I think one of the biggest myths in SAFE is people think SAFE is sidelining architecture, or worse, that Agile does not need architects at all. It's the team who do the job. This could not have been much further from the truth. SAFE actually elevates the role of an architect, but they also shift the way they operate. Instead of being the person who is in the corner office drawing diagrams and doing work in isolation, the architect is now in the thick of it. Is there in the PI planning, in the system demo, in the backlog refinement sessions, helping the teams make fast, informed, and technical decisions. It's not about command and control. It's about collaboration and enablement. Here's a simple example. Imagine a team is trying to decide whether they want to use REST or GraphQL for a new API. In a traditional setup, they would have to wait for weeks to go for an architecture review board, get their approval, and then move on. In SAFE, it's the architect sitting right next to the team, helping them evaluate the trade-offs in real time, maybe by creating a spike, helping them with some exploration enablers, and eventually deciding what is the way to move forward. So the role has not disappeared, it has evolved. And architects are no longer gatekeepers, they are the guides embedded throughout the journey.
That's great, Satya. I hope the architects and the leaders and the team members who are listening to this interview would definitely benefit out of it. Coming back to your own experience as an architect again, can you help us understand or share an example where you saw the safe architecture has enabled faster delivery for the products or the services that you are part of, Satya?
Absolutely. I'll talk about one of my favorite examples, and this is something which will show you how a very small architectural shift can unlock big results. We were working for a large retail organization where multiple teams across different arts were unknowingly building their own versions of the pricing logic. Each team had their own different needs, but at the core, they were all trying to solve the very same problem. It was like multiple chefs in the same kitchen, and each of them was trying to make their own sauce from scratch. One, it is time consuming, and second, it leads to inconsistency. That is when the system architect stepped in. Instead of letting each team reinvent the wheel, they proposed a reusable pricing API, a shared service of sorts that can handle the core logic for everyone, and then everybody could customize and design on top of it. But here is the key. This person did not just design it and throw it over the wall to the developer. The architect socialized it across the teams, got the buy-ins, embedded it as an architecture enabler in the upcoming PI, and ensured it was done. The outcome, all the three arts adopted the shared component. They alone saved about 6 iterations worth of effort, which would have been duplicate, and not to mention the long-term benefit of consistency and easier maintenance. So it's one of the very small examples, but a great example of how safe architect is not about slowing things, but also spotting the patterns, enabling reuse, and helping the team move faster and together.
Definitely, I cannot agree more. They're coming back to the safe big picture, where the design that safe talks about is not just a very robust design in the software development, but rather it's more a balance between the emergent and the intentional design that is being talked about. How do you think the architects make this balance happen in their products or in the journey?
Absolutely. Let me try and explain this with the simple example of building a neighborhood that I was talking about. Let's start. Before everybody starts the construction, the city lays down some intentional design. They decide where the roads would be, electric lines, the water supply, the zoning rules, and all of it. These are non-negotiables. And they make sure that the neighborhood functions well and stays safe. But once all of this is in place, every homeowner is given the design of their own. They might build a cozy cottage or a modern glass house or anything that they want to. And that's the emergent design. That's where creativity and customization within a very safe and structured environment take place. Safe architecture works in a very same way. To take an example, in one of the insurance company that I was working for, the enterprise architect set some boundaries on the cloud security standards, the compliance rules, and the data privacy principles. That was the intentional part, laying down the roads and the utilities. Then came the individual teams, like the ones that were doing the claims processing or the customer portal, and they had the freedom to choose the AWS services that best suit their needs. One team chose Lambda, other team used S3 for document storage. That was the emergent design. Teams innovating locally, but still playing within the safety net led by the larger enterprise. The magic happens when both of them come together. Too much intentional design will stifle innovation. Too much emergent design will ensure that you end up with chaos and rework, which we don't want. And that's where the job of an architect comes in, both as a city planner, as a coach, who is not just setting the stage, but also stepping back and letting the teams build with confidence. That's how I would put it.
No, I think it's a great analogy between building a city and similarly building software or products. And we can all understand the role of the architect in both these scenarios. You spoke about, how the architect role has evolved over the number of years.
Let me talk about a quick story. I was once brought into a PI planning at the very last minute. They apparently had many features and everything was ready. And they realized last minute that an architect was missing. Right? Nothing new there. So let's get an architect because we need an architect in the room. But by then, the teams had already made their assumptions and my inputs felt like a blocker. So people started seeing architecture as a bottleneck. We somehow managed it and started the iterations. But multiple weeks before the next PI planning, I started preparing what I call a tech readiness board, a simple digital board where we were highlighting things like what are the things needed ahead of time, what were the legacy system constraints, what were the enablers that needs to be designed, and what were the features that are dependent on these enablers, non-functional requirements, and even integration risks. Now, this is something which is not very fancy, but it was very timely. So when the teams walked into the PI planning, they were not blindsided. They could estimate the stories more accurately. A lot of rework was avoided. And even there was a lot of opportunities that the teams came up with where we could reuse each other's components. So instead of slowing things down, we are actually accelerating value delivery by helping teams make better decisions and that too earlier. Here is the catch. It's only working because business side made space for it. The product managers and the business owners started looping the architects into the early feature discussions. They stopped treating architects as a tech only guy and started seeing them as a value enabler. So that's the real shift. It's cultural. Architects need to show up early, speak the language of value, and be visible. And business leaders needs to invite them in, not just to review, but to co-create. That's what makes architecture agile and more often than not impactful.
Definitely, Satya. I think that's a very good way for the organization, especially the leaders, the business owners, the product managers, and the architects to really understand how to get involved, bring in more value with their role, and of course, be available when they are needed. Talking about the mindset shift that you spoke about a few minutes ago, don't you think the architects should evolve their own mindset to thrive in scale agile or safe, or even at a team level to bring in the agility, Satya?
True, very true. In fact, I'll talk about a conversation that I had with a very brilliant architect, someone who had designed some of the most elegant systems that I have known. Now, as part of an external review, we realized that the teams were bypassing certain architecture by hard coding it. And there may be multiple reasons. Either they did not know how to do it or they were struggling to implement it. But in another case, I also saw SQL queries that were 6 to 7 pages long. If you look at the queries, they were brilliant and they covered all the aspects of SQL, something that you teach to somebody that you are trying to make understand. But when we came up to maintenance, the teams had to print it, put them on a table, and spend hours figuring out what is that change I would do. The saying goes like this: your architecture won't matter if your teams can't deliver it. That's the shift SAFe asks of architects. You are no longer the sole owner of the architecture, you are the enabler of architectural thinking. It's like moving from the chef who cooks every dish to being the head chef who teaches everybody how to cook well. You are still guiding the flavor, you're still using the same techniques, the standards, but you are doing it through others. So if I put this into practice, it's co-designing, not dictating, which means sitting with your teams during the backlog refinement, sketching the ideas together, looking to shape the solutions with them, or maybe working in small feedback loops, not waiting for the big design review, but working with them, sharing the feedback early, getting the feedback from them, and adjusting. And lastly, valuing delivery over documentation. This is absolutely crucial. A working API that the team can use today is more valuable than a 50-page architecture document that nobody will ever read. So to thrive in SAFe, architects need to shift from being the keepers of the blueprint to the coaches on the field. It's not about letting go of the standards, but it's more about bringing them to life through collaboration. That's how I'd put it.
That's great to know, Satya. And I'm really loving and enjoying the analogies you keep bringing in to help our audience understand how this concept of the architect can be easily and effectively done in their own organizations and teams. Some point ago, you also talk about the collaboration part of the architect with other roles as well. So, do you think the architects can very effectively collaborate with the product managers and RTs in SAFe?
Again, let me take an example. That's what I've been doing. So hopefully that helps. This is one example of an insurance company I was working for. The business wanted to launch a new smart claims routing feature, basically a system that could automatically direct claims to the right adjuster based on the complexity or the location or the workload in the plate of that particular adjuster. The product manager had a very clear vision, but the technical path was not clear. We did not know how to do it. And that's where the architect steps in, not as a gatekeeper, but as a co-creator. Together, the architect and the product manager built the feature backlog, which did not just list the benefit features like auto-assigning claims or something like that. It also had enablers like claim data normalization or maybe rules generation and all of those things. Now, when these were done, there were still some unknowns, and those unknowns were added as spikes. One of the spike that was added was to see how existing policy database could handle real-time queries. Another one tested how different models could route accurately to the right adjuster. In all this, the RTE or release train engineer helped facilitate the collaboration by making sure these items were visible and they were prioritized during the PI planning. So when we went into the right PI planning, the teams had a very clear runway. They were not blocked mid-sprint by any missing infrastructure or any unclear dependencies. And the business got working on the MVP, which is the main thing that they wanted to go live 2 PIs ahead of schedule. So the key is architects bring in the how, the product managers bring in the why, and the RTs bring in the when. And when all these three work together and not in silo, that's when delivery becomes smooth, fast, and much better aligned.
Thank you for that answer, Satya. One of the areas of concern for the organization and leaders, and of course the architect itself, is the technical debt. How do you think the architects help manage this technical debt in SAFe?
Again, let's start with an easy analogy. Imagine you're running an insurance company and your claim system is like your house. So over time, you have added new rooms, you have patched some problems in your old rooms, but you ignored to fix a few leaky pipes. That's technical debt. The hidden cost of shortcuts, the legacy code, and all those deferred decisions that you have taken over time. If you look at SAFe, architects don't just point at the leaks, they fix them and they stop, and they also make sure that it does not stop the whole renovation. In the insurance firm, the policy servicing platform had grown over time, and there were multiple teams adding features, but no one had touched the core policy validation engine in ages. It was fragile, it was undocumented, and it was slowing everyone down. The system architect did not just raise a red flag. Instead, they worked with the product managers to log it as a technical debt. It was not a complaint. It was more of an scoped enabler. And they broke it down into multiple things. There was a spike to assess the impact of refactoring. There were enabler stories to modularize the code and add automated tests. And there were something called Tech Date Fridays that they did, where there was like a 2 hours window every sprint where the teams would chip away and look at known issues. But here is the key. The architect framed it in terms of flow and risk. They showed them how fixing the validation engine would reduce production incidents, speed up the feature delivery, and improve the audit readiness. And all these things is what business cared about. So the architect never managed technical debts as a debt. They identified it early, they made it visible, and they connected it to the value, the term that business understands. And that's how it gets the attention and the funding that it deserves. So it's not just about cleaning up your house for the sake of it. It's about making sure that the house does not collapse when you are trying to bring in your new furniture. That's tech debt in my books, and that's how an architect solves.
That's great, Satya. And I'm sure, our audience would be finding this very valuable, the insights that you are providing about all the terms the architects get into every day in and day out. Another interesting term that SAFE brings in is called as the architectural runway. Can you help us also understand what is this architectural runway and how do the architects ensure that this is maintained or managed across PI to PI?
Great. Think of it like your building's foundation, right? Something that would not extend, but if you don't build it, you will eventually run out of room to build. In SAFE, the architects are responsible for making sure that they have enough things for the teams to work at least 1 or 2 PI ahead of time. In one of the insurance companies that I was working on, we were planning to launch a new feature called instant claims approval, something that would use AI to auto approve simple claims within minutes. Sounds brilliant, right? Saves a lot of time. But under the hood, it required a lot of real-time data access, a lot of integrations with fraud detection, and scalable rules engine. To avoid any surprises, we introduced a tool they called the runway canvas. Every time the team mapped their features against an infrastructure or a design element, they would need a event bus or maybe a spike or maybe a rules engine that needs to be upgraded. So by visualizing this early, they made sure that they turned the long-term risk into backlog items. So there were no last-minute fire drills. These enablers were then prioritized along with the business feature during the PA planning. That is how the team was able to build the instant canvas feature, but the foundation was already in place. There was no blocker, nobody was scrambling, and it led to smooth delivery. So by maintaining the runway, it is not just about guessing the feature, it is about forecasting the needs, creating the enablers, and making the architecture visible so that the team can build with confidence. That's how the architects help.
Definitely. I think that's a very good information about the architectural runway. Coming to more recent and current trends that are happening all across the world, especially, the AI and the cloud and, other such technologies. How do you think the safe architecture is keeping pace or coping up with trends like these?
Oh, absolutely. It is evolving very fast, especially because the technological landscape is also evolving very fast. And the architects of today, they are not just system designers, they are the stewards of ethical, scalable, and intelligent systems. Think of rolling an AI-powered virtual assistant to help your customers file claims through chat. Sounds simple, right? I just type my claims and it's filed. But under the hood, it's very complex. The architect does not just build the tech stack, they also have these deeper questions that needs answering. For example, how do we detect the model drifting into so that the decision making is not poor over time? How do we ensure data privacy, especially when we are handling sensitive claims information? How do we build in observability so that we can trace how the AI is doing it and why is it doing it? All of it has to be baked into the architecture from day one, not an afterthought. Let's add the cloud native design into the mix. Let's say this was to be deployed on a cloud. So we are now shifting from a monolithic system to microservices, maybe to serverless architecture, maybe to cost-aware scaling. Now, these are things which architect has to redesign if they are not thought in advance. And once it has been done, it could cut the cost of the cloud by maybe about 30%. So the role is evolving. Architects are no longer just thinking about how do I build it? They are thinking about how do I build it responsibly, which involves the ethics, the compliance. They are building it to scale, building it cloud native so that we can scale as much as we need. And they're also building it to adapt because there is a lot of change that is happening in the technical world. Something that you build today may become obsolete tomorrow. That's where safe architects are becoming the bridge between innovation and integrity. That's how I would put it.
Thank you for that information, Satya. And based on your extensive experience as an architect and the kind of organizations and the products that you have been working in, if I ask you, what are some advice or maybe a couple of advices that you really want to give to the architects who are maybe moving away from traditional to more of an agile mindset based products, or maybe safe? What would those advices be, Satya?
The first one I would do is drop the blueprint. Architects love drawing a blueprint that lasts maybe 3 years, 5 years. Instead of that, pick up a whiteboard. The job is not to have a perfect system in isolation. It is to help the teams build the right system together. And that's not it. A mindset shift has to be done. We have been talking about it multiple times. So stop becoming the architect of answers. Start becoming the architect of questions. Work shoulder to shoulder with your teams, sketch the ideas, explore the trade-offs, guide them. Don't become a guard. And that is how you can eventually bring real value into the projects and the programs that you deliver. If you focus on enabling flow, protecting the quality, and evolving the architecture iteratively, you won't just stay relevant, you will be indispensable. That's how I would let the architects change as we go along into this new way of working.
Thank you, Satya. And I think this also brings us to the end of this podcast today. What a conversation it was. And today, I think we redefined architecture as something which is very, very dynamic, human centric and deeply collaborative, as explained very well by Satya based on his examples, based on his experiences. Remember, architecture is not just about documentation, it's also about the direction, decision making, and eventually delivering of value to your customers. Once again, I would like to pass on a huge thanks to Satya for walking us through the various trenches of the safe architecture. Remember, if you are an architect or even a change agent or a leader in your organization, keep in mind great architecture isn't what is drawn on a slide. It's what really enables the flow of your systems through your teams and through your organization. With that, I would like to sign off. Once again, thanks to Satya for being there. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll be talking more, something interesting related to the business agility. So don't miss out. Reach out to us if you have any interesting topic for us. For now, this is Neeraj Bachani signing off from NuePulse, brought to you by Nuearcus. Thank you.